Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have a special guest today with us. That is Jessica Klement, and she is the Vice President of Advocacy for ASTA. And she is here to tell us all about the wonderful things that ASTA is doing for the travel agent society in general. They work hard for you to pass laws and advocate for you every day. And we're thrilled to hear about all the successes from the year and looking forward into 2025.
Thanks so much, Karen. I actually have what turned out to be a fairly lengthy PowerPoint, if it's okay if I share my screen.
Absolutely. Please do.
Great. Well, while I pull it up and try not to, that's not the screen I wanted. I was going to say, and try not to um, embarrass myself while doing it, but I think I may have just done that. Are you guys seeing my PowerPoint right now?
Oh,
Yes.
you know what, Elaine?
We see it.
Okay. There we go. And the little Teams thing isn't blocking it, is it?
No, it looks perfect.
Thanks. Great. Thank you so much. I'm actually working from home today because I had a few things actually on Capitol Hill. So not at my office with my multiple monitors like usual. But thank you guys so much for having me. As Karen said, I'm the VP of Advocacy at ASTA, which basically just means I carry out all of our initiatives with the Hill and the administration, everything that goes on in Washington, and also some state stuff that we've been working on. So I'm just going to get started because it's a kind of lengthy presentation. So I'm going to go over what advocacy is and what we do, the things we worked on in 2024, our successes, and unfortunately, one disappointing piece of news coming from the administration, what we're looking at doing the rest of the year into next year. And then, of course, I can't not talk about ASTA's Political Action Committee. So thanks to everyone for joining me here today. So ASTA's mission is to represent the agency community. And I think a lot of people think about that just in terms of Washington, right? Like, what do we do in Washington and in front of lawmakers? But it's so much bigger than that, right? Like, ASTA's mission is all things travel advisor, independent contractor, W-2, big agency, small agency, corporate travel, leisure travel, across the board. And we represent all facets of the travel advisor community, not just in front of government, like I do. It's what I do every day, but also the travel suppliers, the technologies, the GDS. I've been on board with ASTA for about 3 years now. I think I finally know what GDS stands for and a lot of the other acronyms. And then, of course, also the consumers. And towards the end of the presentation, I'm going to talk about some of the work that ASTA is doing from an association standpoint in each of these areas. But I'm going to spend the bulk of my presentation on what we're doing for advocacy. And I want to make sure that I highlight that advocacy isn't just what I do. It's not just the direct lobbying in Washington. It is that. And I'm ASTA's right now sole registered lobbyist. We do have some outside firms, but it's also grassroots advocacy. It's what you do on the ground level. It's coming to legislative day here in DC. It's sending a letter to your member of Congress. It's writing an op-ed. It's contributing to ASTA's Political Action Committee. It's action that you take. And then, of course, we also have our political engagement, which is ASTA's Political Action Committee, where we collect your voluntary contributions and give them to the campaigns for those running for Congress. More often than not, almost 100% of the time, people we want to see return to Congress because they are our allies. I'm going to talk about that at the end if there is time. So I was on a webinar trying to be, a better advocate for you. And I heard this quote and I loved it. So I started putting it in all of my presentations. Investing in advocacy is investing in your business. No one is thinking about your business the way you are. And if you're not investing your time and money in advocacy, you're not investing in your business. And I love that this person, who shall remain nameless because I can't find the quote, I actually did find it using AI, but I didn't trust it. But I couldn't find it quickly with a Google search. Like, they tie those two things together. You can't have a successful business without advocacy. And I actually couldn't do my job without you in your business. So really, I like to kick off my presentations with this one. And we've seen that advocacy and the success of those advocacy efforts time and time again over the years. And over the last decade, ASTA's efforts on both the legislative side and the regulatory, so that's Capitol Hill and the White House and the administration, has saved the travel advisor community roughly $724 million in new taxes and fees, costs to your businesses that they were proposing. That's over $8,000 for every single one of the travel advisors that ASTA represents. Certainly a lot of.
I think you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Hey, Jessica.
Yes, it actually did look like I had been muted. So thank you
Okay.
for that.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Thank you for flagging it because I couldn't see the screen, so I had no idea. So thank you for that. I'm gonna go back to the presentation quickly. Go back to this slide. All right. Oop, nope, that started me from the beginning. All right. Are you guys seeing the slide that says there's been a lot going on?
Yes.
Okay, well, there's been a lot going on. So this is just taking a quick look back at this year at 2024. We have had a ton of stuff. We had an American Airlines fight and their switch to NDC. We had a DOT rule on ancillary fees. We had 2 DOT rules on ticket refunds. We had a DOL rule on overtime. FAA reauthorization, which comes along every 5 years, was signed into law earlier this year. We had a couple state tax fights, one that's actually currently ongoing. And then we had ASTA's Legislative Day, which set our agenda for the rest of the year. So let's start with that American Airlines and NDC nonsense. So in April of 2023, American Airlines removed 40% of its fares from the EDIFACT system, meaning there was a substantial price discrepancy between what you guys were seeing in your systems and what the consumers were seeing on Americans' front-facing websites. We had this, this was flagged for us in the months leading up to this, and then in April it hit, and a lot of our corporate agencies, but also leisure agencies too, are saying, you know, American Airlines is not letting me see all their fares. They're not letting me see all their options. I can't serve my clients because American was rushing to implement NDC in a way that wasn't compatible with agencies. And if you're on the corporate side, that meant some serious duty of care implications because you use a corporate travel agent to, you know, make sure that your employees are getting to the places they need to be. And once that employee books on their own, you lose that duty of care. Adding insult to injury, American Airlines further announced that only tickets sold through preferred agencies will earn miles. Keep in mind, they did not tell you what a preferred agency looked like, if you were going to be a preferred agency. So if you were a consumer booking through a travel advisor and that travel advisor was not, that agency was not considered preferred by Americans' very vague standards, purposely vague, I might add, that client wasn't going to earn miles for those flights. Needless to say, starting in April of 2023, this took up a lot of our time here at ASTA. So we tried to start small, right? We tried to say, okay, let's try and figure this out, right? We started with meetings between the travel agencies and American Airlines. That broke down very, very quickly. We filed an informal complaint with DOT into American Airlines business practices. It was very clear they were trying to book the travel agency out of the book. They were trying to push the travel agency out of the booking channel. When our draft informal complaint to DOT did not go anywhere, we filed a formal complaint with them as well. American responded, we responded to that. We also went a step further and filed an anti-competition complaint with DOJ, highlighting the markets where American has a huge disproportionate presence. I live in Washington, D.C. Reagan National is one of those airports. American Airlines has 60% of the slots at DCA, despite the fact that the 4 biggest airlines make up almost 70% of the entire flights in the United States. So And then, so that was on the NDC side. We're also in talks to start an ad campaign with Politico. And when to highlight some of the priorities we had in the FAA reauthorization process that was also moving through Congress during this time. And when AA came out with the announcement that only preferred agencies, which they couldn't define or tell you if you were one, would their clients only receive miles in those cases, we developed a very vigorous PR campaign called Save My Miles. That got the attention of both advisors and consumers, leading to over 8,500 letters sent to Congress. Towards, I think it was end of April of this year, early May, ASTA CEO Zane Kirby and I both testified at a joint hearing between the Department of Transportation and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau here in DC. Like Secretary Buttigieg was there, so was the leader of the CFPB, to highlight Americans' practices and the negative effect it was having on travel agencies. At the end of the day, as we were sitting in Dallas during ASTA's Travel Advisor Conference, the announcement came that American Airlines was completely scrapping its plans for both NDC and removing the fares from EDIFACT and the mileage program, in which only preferred agency clients would get mileage. Certainly some cause for celebration. This felt like a 1.5 year long effort on the part of ASTA to get to this point. We're super pleased with the end result. We have re-engaged American as an association partner. On December 3rd, ASTA's SVP and General Counsel Peter Labasso is going to hold a larger webinar on this issue, highlighting for the ASTA members everything ASTA did to get that winning victory in 2024, as well as talk about where we're going to go with our anti-competition, anti-competitive stance in light of an administration request to talk about airline competition. All while this was going on, Congress was working on FAA reauthorization. The administration was similarly working on rules regarding airline refunds. The final rule came out almost 2 years after the draft rule was initially proposed. And this final rule from the administration in May of this year set the parameters for which consumers are due a refund if their flight is canceled or significantly changed, if you have to depart or land in a different airport. If any one of those things is not conducive to the traveler automatically gets a refund. There's no more, or will you take this voucher, or can I put some miles in your account? The trigger is automatically a refund. And from a consumer standpoint, as someone who flies often, as I'm sure you do as well, this was hailed as a huge victory for consumers. This Department of Transportation in particular felt very strongly that consumers were not protected during the pandemic, and the airlines engaged in a lot of bad behavior, and they needed to address that. So in in May of this year, they came out with these new regulations on when a customer is due a refund, and that refund is due within 7 days of the flight being canceled, or 20 days if you purchased it not using a credit card. But in doing all these things that most people were actually pretty happy about, the rule stated that the merchant of record is the one responsible for providing the refund. So if on your client's credit card, it says the name of your travel agency and not, say, American Airlines, you are the entity responsible for providing them that refund. While this doesn't really affect a large number of travel advisors or travel agencies. Only, we ballparked it at 5 to 8% of agencies in the DOT rule. They said less than 10%. The people who it affects them greatly. You can see this with like group bookings, or, an advisor may purchase 40 or 50 seats on a plane and package it with an entire group trip. In that case, you're buying it from the agency. You're not buying that ticket from the airline itself. And while DOT said airlines have to reimburse the consumer in 7 days, and even though in this case, the consumer is the travel agent or the travel agency, DOT did not stipulate on how the airlines will reimburse the travel agency. And it wasn't silent. It actively said, we are not going to take a position on this. The airlines and the agencies can figure it out within the market. And ASTA members said, no, we're not. We've had enough problems with the airlines over the years. Per the FAA reauthorization bill, DOT then issued a second rule in August that said airlines have to reimburse agencies promptly. It did not, however, define what prompt was. So I don't believe the second rule helped us in any case. We're in the same place we were. And this rule took effect on October 28th, so just a couple weeks ago. We do have a webinar on this topic in ASTA's video library. It is exceptionally comprehensive and walks you through some options. If you haven't watched it, if you are an ASTA member, you do have to be logged in to access it. I strongly encourage you to do so, particularly if you are an advisor who finds yourself booking flights for clients on your agency credit card. Okay, so that was a pretty tough day. So the administration came out with this rule. We had language in the FAA reauthorization that would have usurped it because legislation will always overrule any sort of regulation. We had language in the House version of the FAA reauthorization bill that would have prevented agencies from being on the hook if they, no longer have the money to provide that refund. The rule came out, and the FAA bill was released publicly 2 days after that, the House and Senate compromise bill, and the provisions in there were changed. So that was a pretty rough day for me. It was a pretty rough week. We got this bad piece of regulation from the administration. We hope Congress is going to address it, and Congress doesn't, and Congress chooses not to, right? It just says write a second rule on how airlines will reimburse the agencies. And when I talk about it, I frequently forget that 2024 was filled with some pretty good news too. So I like to have this slide in here to remind me. DOT also put out an ancillary fee rule shortly after the ticket refund rule on how you have to notify clients as it relates to bag fees or code share agreements or anything else. Certain airlines, they charge you for soda. Most of the ancillary fee rule reflected ASTA's recommendations and exempted the TMCs, the travel management companies, from its requirements, mostly across the board. So that was definitely a win for the association. And as much as I was disappointed, FAA reauthorization did not take into account the ticket refund issue. It did do a number of things, including streamlining offline disclosures. You no longer have to read a lengthy list of disclosures. If you are booking a flight for a client over the phone, you can just point them to an online website. It created a new passenger experience committee on which ticket agents will be given a seat. That will be us. They have the ACPAC, which I'm actually going to talk about a little later, has to consult ticket agents. And again, there were some provisions in the Senate bill that the travel management companies were not on board with, and those were ultimately removed in the final bill at ASTA's urging. We also had this DOL overtime pay rule that came from the administration in, I think it was April of this year, that just on Friday was invalidated in a lower court. So I was all ready to talk about this, and now it's not really relevant anymore. Mainly, the same thing happened in 2016 into 2017 before the first Trump administration took office. So it wasn't a huge surprise that a lower court invalidated this change. We are nonetheless pretty happy, as this could have affected many of the agencies with W-2 employees. This was not an issue for independent contractors. So I want to talk briefly about ASTA's work on the state level. We've seen some state tax fights over the years, and now there have been at least 3 in the 3 years I have been at ASTA. Mainly, there are a number of states which exempt travel agencies, travel services, etc., from state taxes. And the efforts on the state level have been to remove the exemption for those states. ASTA was successful in fighting one of those proposals in Kentucky in 2022. Kentucky did actually move forward with its tax proposal, and travel agencies, travel services were removed at the 11th hour. Our folks in Kentucky did a lot of work there. We also similarly had a tax fight in Nebraska just last month. The governor was pushing some massive tax changes, which can be very difficult to go up against a sitting governor. Ultimately, the entire tax package failed, which was good for ASTA and its members there. At the current moment, and I can see my phone kind of lighting up as I do this, we have boots on the ground in Louisiana fighting their loss there as having a tax exempt status. So the governor in Louisiana is trying to lower income tax on its residents by raising sales tax on businesses, including travel services, to the tune of 4.5%. Our argument down in Louisiana has been, if I lose business because my clients can take their travel needs to anyone, either inside of Louisiana or out, if I'm losing income because I'm losing sales, a income tax lowering doesn't really help me. That argument does seem to be resonating with state lawmakers there. And that bill, which was expected to easily pass the Louisiana State House, has not made it through either chamber there. And you may not be affected by, and you may not live in any of these three states. I highlight that because I think people may think of ASTA as your voice in Washington, but ASTA is also your voice at the state level. And our chapters, when mobilized, get really excited to take action. And in Louisiana in particular, are making a huge impact and doing some phenomenal outreach, numbers I would have never expected from the advisors in that state. So, just as a reminder, if things come up for you at the state level, like these ones that we've had here or something, similar, it doesn't have to be a tax fight. Like ASTA is here for you on the state level as well, not just the federal. All right, so that concludes up until now my look back at the first 10 and a half months of 2024. Now, we do have about 6 weeks left of the current Congress. We have about 2 months left before the Trump administration re-enters Washington. So, we got some time left to do some things. And after the DOT rule on ticket refunds came out, and I heard from ASTA members who do a lot of group bookings who said, I could be put out of business with one canceled flight. I said, we got to do something. The administration was not willing to address it. We got to take this issue to Congress. And it found favor with Representative Maria Salazar, who is a Republican in the Miami area of Florida. She's a huge ASTA member company in her district. She knows the ASTA members well. And I said, hey, there's going to come a time where a flight is canceled and a travel agency is going to be put out of business because of it. And we really tried to take the small business argument to Congress on this. And I think it resonated. So right before ASTA's legislative day in September, Representative Salazar introduced the Flight Refund Fairness Act, which stipulated that small businesses so if you are a small business based on SBA's standards, you do not have to pay your client that airline refund until you receive the money from the airline. I think it is, quite frankly, just ridiculous that DOT would say, airlines have to give consumers back their money in 7 days, but there is no time frame for which airlines need to give the money back to the travel advisors. Mind you, that the travel advisors need to give their clients back the refund in 7 days, but there's no stipulation on when the travel agency will give the money from the airline. It doesn't make any sense, right? So it's like, okay, if the administration isn't going to deal with it, we're going to find a way for Congress to address it, and they did. And that bill is up to, I think, 7 co-sponsors at this point in time, 5 of which came from ASTA's legislative day. So we're going to keep talking about it and then hopefully get legislation reintroduced early in the next Congress, the beginning of next year. We also have a piece of legislation that was introduced last year, but was also in both versions, House and Senate, of the FAA reauthorization bill, that ultimately got stripped out and at the end in ways for reasons I'm still not entirely clear of. But DOT has an Aviation Consumer Protection Advisory Committee. It is to advise DOT on airline issues, flight issues, anything pertaining to the airlines that affect consumers. Now, when I talk about travel advisors on the Hill, I talk about that they are both a consumer themselves, right? Like they buy airline tickets, they are travelers themselves, but they're also the consumer advocate. They advocate for their clients. And as I watched the whole ticket refund debate play out, and I sat in hearings at DOT, and I had my own meetings with the Department of Transportation career staffers, it was very clear to me that either DOT lacks understanding of the travel advisor community or willfully ignores them. I'm not quite sure which one is true, and honestly, I'm not quite sure which one is worse, but the end result is that the voice of the travel advisor community is lacking within DOT. So this legislation was introduced to give ticket agents a seat on the ACPAC, and hopefully, if they had it, we would not be in this situation where rules are coming out that affect the travel advisors differently than they do any other consumers. There are action letters on both of these pieces of legislation that you can send to your House representative asking him or her to co-sponsor them. If you haven't taken this action, I would strongly encourage you to do so. I'm hoping to end the year strong in terms of co-sponsors so we can come out of the gate pretty quickly at the beginning of next year and the new 119th Congress. If there's time and people need me to show you how to do it, I'd be happy to do that as well. But if you go to ASTA's advocacy page, it's actually pretty easy to find. All right, so we did the look back. We've done what's coming up in the next 6 to 8 weeks. So now we have to look to 2025. I've been doing a bunch of these reporter interviews with the travel trade press. Like, what does the Trump administration mean for, for the travel advisor community, for travel agencies? And I'm not quite sure anyone has a really good answer to that, but, past can be prologue. And while the administration is new, it's not new, right? I didn't do travel issues in the first Trump administration. I was not with ASTA at the time, and I wasn't in this space. So I have a lot to learn about things that ASTA did and said in response to administrative action back then. But there's, some things we can reasonably anticipate. Will there be travel bans? Things like that, where ASTA already has an established position. Both the House and Senate go into next year with very narrow Republican control. We have 11 new senators, and at least 60 new House members. There are a handful of House races that still have not been called, which just means there are going to be a lot of new people in Washington, people who do not know regular order, people who haven't been through things like a midterm election or a surface transportation bill, which is going to take up a lot of time in our committees of jurisdiction, haven't been through budget reconciliation process before. This also provides us an excellent opportunity to build new relationships. Committee assignments should probably be finalized sometime by the end of February. There are undoubtedly going to be more new members to the Transportation and Commerce committees in both the House and Senate. Transportation Infrastructure Committee is actually the largest of all the House committees and is usually very bipartisan. So we'll have a lot of opportunity there. We will also have a new Department of Transportation Secretary. Soon to be, again, President Trump has nominated Sean Duffy. Just yesterday, I believe he announced his intent to nominate Sean Duffy, who is a former member of Congress from my home state of Wisconsin, Fox News personality now. Not a ton of transportation experience from what I've been able to tell. But regardless of the new secretary, we will certainly be asking the administration to take a second look at the refund rule and the impact it's going to have on travel agencies. President Trump has also nominated Florida Senator Marco Rubio to be the Secretary of State Rubio has some very strong opinions on Cuba that may impact travel to Cuba in, stronger ways than we have now. So keeping an eye on things like that. And that was a really, really lengthy way of saying, even while administrations change and Congresses change and leadership changes, ASTA's priorities really do not. The two bills I talked about will be priorities again next year. There's going to be things that we have to react to, and there's, things that we're going to have to fight. There's going to be things that we're going to support in Congress. They're going to ask for our support, and we'll probably lend it. ASTA's priorities don't change based on which party's in control in Washington, which party's in the White House. Our priorities just don't. How we go about them, how I go about them certainly will, as relationships change too, but ASTA's priorities really remain the same. Just anecdotally, prior to coming to ASTA, I advocated for federal employees and retirees for a long time. And that can be a little bit of a polarizing issue. It's a little bit more partisan than travel. And there are certain offices I'd go into and be like, oh, federal employees again. Nobody dislikes travel. It's a wonderful place to be. It's great to walk into a Hill office and be like, hey, I represent the travel advisors. Everybody loves travel. Our issues are largely nonpartisan. So we don't have to pivot as much when there is a new person in the White House or a new party in control in Congress. So that's what I can tell you as best I can on November 19th as to where ASTA's legislative priorities and regulatory ones are going to go next year. But we're also looking to, the future of the association, right? Undoubtedly, we're going to have some airline competition. The Biden administration took a really strong stance on airline competition, preventing the JetBlue Spirit merger. It stands to reason that a Trump administration is going to take a less strong stance on airline competition. Of course, airlines are continuing to move forward with NDC implementation. In this bucket, I would also put the fight between Turkish Airlines and Sabre. Turkish flights are no longer available in Sabre. That is an issue ASTA tried to work on behind the scenes, tried to get the two parties to come together when ultimately it did not prove fruitful. ASTA put out a statement about it. Like, we're trying to do a lot of work behind the scenes to allow you guys to be able to do your jobs easier. There is no doubt in my mind that AI is going to continue to be something that we all talk about, and it's going to affect the way you do your business. And ASTA's Premium Business Summit just last month talked a lot about this and how if you're going to be successful, you probably need to embrace AI to a certain extent. But also, the question begs the question, is AI going to replace the travel advisor? We certainly don't think it will, but it's obviously something that we're going to keep an eye on. We're currently surveying our members on Onyx and its inability, it seems, to provide timely commission payments. I'm not the lead on that issue, but it has been flagged for us, and it seems to be a problem across the board. So we're working on that. And whenever I travel, I hear concerns about fraud, two-factor authentication. Sorry, it's late in the day here. And making sure that your payments are going to the right places. So I think those are some industry issues we're going to continue to talk about next year and certainly beyond. And then we also have our internal priorities as well. And a big one for us within our communications department is promoting the value of the travel advisor to consumers. ASTA gets a lot of great press, a lot considering the size of the association. Like, it's, we're doing our best to say, hey, did your last trip suck? Maybe you should use a travel advisor next time. I'm obviously paraphrasing our PR. Their PR does not say that. But, trying to highlight the value of the travel advisor to the consumers. And with that comes growing ASTA's membership. I can't continue to do the things on the Hill that I need to do without the support of the members that comes in their due structure. So if you're sitting here listening and you're not an ASTA member, I do hope you consider joining us and joining the fights that we will have. We also have a verified travel advisor program, and we're really reinvigorating that internally. You guys work in a profession that does not have a licensing or a certification the way, say, real estate agents do. So how do we set the standards for professionalism? How does somebody know that the travel advisor they can Google is different than the travel advisor they're seeing in their social media feed? How do they know who they can trust to book their multi-generational, family trip or their honeymoon? And we really think the VTA is going to become the standard by which industry professionals are judged, independent of, not having a licensing for the industry. So if you're considering becoming a VTA, or if you've looked into it, you have any questions about it, I can certainly point you to the right people and ask the staff to do that. Sometime in Q1, I think it's going to be early next year, we are going to have a brand new Find a Travel Advisor portal on ASTA's website with our members. You can, so consumers know where to find people that ASTA has verified, that ASTA will stand behind in their membership. No one real place exists for that, and we do think ASTA is going to be the home for that. We've also started to have many conversations internally about re-engaging ASTA's corporate agencies. Our corporate advisory council tackling issues like Turkish and Sabre, and we need to do a better job of continuing the conversations with them and keeping them in the loop when things are going on at ASTA as well. So we're talking about that internally. All this is to say that the best place to come talk about these things and hear about these things and learn how to improve your business will be the ASTA Travel Advisor Conference in Salt Lake City. We have different tracks based on where you are in your career, based on how long you've been a travel advisor that you can opt into. Do you need tools and tips and training on how to better run your business, or do you need training on the hot new destination you want to hear directly from them? There is something for every single travel advisor at the Travel Advisor Conference. So I do hope that you will consider joining us in Salt Lake next year in May. It's a really engaging conference. It's one of my favorites. People come away having learned a lot that they can take back to their businesses. And all the topics I just talked about will inevitably be touched on either from the main stage or in breakout sessions. I also want to highlight all of ASTA's major events for next year. The River Cruise Expo will have almost 2,000 people in Vienna, highlighting, I believe, 15 different ships at this point in time. It's currently ASTA's River Cruise Week, especially for those who can't join us in Vienna. They can learn about the cruises this week and the cruise offerings. I talked about the Travel Advisor Conference. We have our Caribbean Showcase next year in Jamaica. Travel Masters is our annual golf outing, invite only. Legislative Day, which unsurprisingly is my favorite, is going to be in October of next year. I love the feedback that always comes from Legislative Day because it allows us to improve next year. But you guys spend the day on Capitol Hill talking about your businesses and your priorities and why the things that Congress does, we undoubtedly are going to have a tax fight next year. The things that Congress does and how it affects your businesses, right? Some, of course, bias, but I do love Legislative Day. And then our Premium Business Summit is for our premium members. I believe 1,000 Mile Group is one of them. We were on the Virgin Voyages ship this year, a couple weeks ago. We'll be back on dry land in Portland, Oregon next year. So if you can, I hope you will consider joining us for at least the Travel Advisor Conference. But if you got excited while I was talking about the advocacy things, I would, of course, love to see you at Legislative Day as well. So, Karen, I think I'm going to stop screen sharing there for right now. I have a couple slides on ASTA PAC just because, 1,000 Mile Group does have the PAC page, so I can keep going. I got about 3 more slides left, but I figured if people had questions or if we're already running out of time, because I can talk all day. My husband, who is sitting at this table with me, is nodding in agreement. So just, wanted to give an opportunity if you wanted me to pause there.
We have one question that came in, Jessica. So Sarah would like to know, how do you find and get involved with a local ASTA chapter?
Oh, that is a great question. I do believe there is a Find Your ASTA chapter on ASTA's website, and I'm going to see if I can find it because that's a great question. I believe all the contact information for the chapter presidents is on that website as well. If nothing else, you can email we have two people in our chapter department at ASTA. It is chapters@asta.org. But I found it. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen quick. Let's see here. Window, Chrome. So what I did from ASTA's main website is went to the hamburger menu. It looks weird on my screen right now. I went to chapters and committees. So if you scroll down, here's the information on the ASTA chapters. It is not necessarily state-based. I know we have states that go over regions. So I think South Florida or Florida, for example, I know they have a Central Florida chapter and a South Florida chapter. So there can be multiple chapters within one state, but I'm just going to click on Florida and there you go. You can get the president's directory or the chapter presidents for Central Florida, North Florida, South Florida. There's a Suncoast chapter, which is the West Coast to Central Florida. So if you want to get more involved, and I hope you do, that would be the place to start. If you can't find what you're looking for, I would say email Gwen and Jasmine in our chapters department, and that email is just chapters@asta.org.
Thank you, Jessica.
You're welcome. Do you want me to talk a little bit about ASTA's Political Action Committee? I mean, we're fresh
Sure.
off an election.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint quickly. There we go. So I'm going to trust that you can see it. So much like every other trade association and a lot of corporations, ASTA has a political action committee. And that is your voluntary, I cannot stress this enough, your voluntary contributions to ASTA PAC that we then pool and give to the campaigns of members of Congress running for reelection. We do occasionally give to non-incumbents candidates. We had one down in Texas this election cycle who went to high school with ASTA members down there, whose mother was a travel advisor. Our folks in Texas had said, "Hey, we know this person. He understands our businesses. Do you think we could support him in his primary?" He said, "Absolutely." I did a call with him to ask some very basic questions, and that's that. But most of it, it's helping the people we want to keep in Congress stay in Congress. Well, why do we do this? For one, it helps us advance our legislative priorities. If anyone on the call is in Nevada, you know that Jackie Rosen just had a very tough reelection to the U.S. Senate. Jackie Rosen is the lead on almost every piece of legislation we've had moving through the Senate over the last few years, right? We want to keep Jackie Rosen in Congress. But every time we make a contribution like that, it comes with an event, right? I actually just went to a lunch today. It's with a member of Congress I know well who knows me, but if it didn't, it'd be like another touch point, right? Oh, there's Jessie. She's with the travel advisors. Oh, those travel advisors, they must be pretty politically active if I keep seeing Jessie at all these events, right? It keeps us in front of the people we want to be in front of. So we can use it to strengthen relationships and we can also use it to build relationships, right? It allows me to go to, an event and say, "Hey, DOT did this." And, it's really bad for my members. Maria Salazar introduced this legislation to address it. I'd really like your support. You can't do that and go into somebody's personal office, congressional office, month after month with the same ask, right? but I can put myself and put ASTA in front of them every month through these political contributions. So I get it. Like, we're off of an election cycle. If you live in a swing state, if you live in a state that had a Senate race, you're probably really happy you have your television back. So I want to point out from the beginning that ASTA does not, and to the best of my knowledge, never has, contributed to any presidential candidate. We didn't this cycle. I wasn't here 4 years ago, but I checked with everyone. I didn't go back and check every FEC report, but to the best of my knowledge, ASTA has never given in the presidential race at all. So why should you contribute? And Thousand Mile Group has a team page, which I'm going to put up on the next slide. And I think the reason why because you don't know where that money goes, right? We ask you to contribute. We pool the money, a separate bank account for it. And then, myself or someone else on the staff, our CEO, a board member will go to a fundraiser, right? I don't really see that. But I really think, even though you don't feel it, it is truly a grassroots effort. Because I go in there and I talk about how there are almost 200,000 travel advisors across the country and how many of them are in their state and how much business they do, right? So it allows me to talk about your businesses and to tell your story. And in doing so, we can make a bigger impact because we are limited in how much money we can give. And so are you as individuals. So by pooling our money, we can make bigger contributions that any one person can on their own. But if for no other reason, it's the only legal way that we can do this. I cannot by law use your dues money for these purposes. It has to come from your voluntary contributions. And as I mentioned, Thousand Mile Group does have a team page. I believe it has a goal of $1,000. It's at around 250 right now. So if you are so inclined, I would, of course, love your support, even though we are after the election. I'm really looking forward to starting 2025 off strong. We're in a really good place right now to do that. Every dollar certainly helps and allows us to start the year stronger. So I do hope you will consider both joining ASTA. Oh, I have a join. There we go. Joining ASTA and making a political contribution if you are so inclined. We have a $50 off code to join and renew. It is good through the end of the year. Way to go, Andrea. It sounds like Karen, you and her probably worked this out. Every time I give this, it's like, oh, it's only good for the next week or the next 2 weeks. You guys are lucky you get it through the end of the year. $50 off with the promo code 1000 Mile to join ASTA or renew your membership. If you're a sitting member, you can use the discount code to renew your membership as well. That does conclude my PowerPoint. It looks like we have a question.
We have a couple questions. Kathy
Great.
Sikora has her hand raised. Kathy, did you want to take yourself off mute and ask your question personally to Jessica? Kathy? Maybe she doesn't realize she has her hand raised. That might be an error. All right, we'll circle back with Kathy after. And then Debbie Hodges would like to know how can we find out which candidates ASTA PAC supports?
That's a great question. So every time you give me money that's over $200, or anytime ASTA PAC makes a contribution to a campaign, it has to be reported to the FEC. That $200 is over the course of the entire year. So if you give like 50, 50, 50, 50, that last 50, then it gets reported to the FEC that you've given us $200 at that point in time. This is a highly legislated and highly regulated industry. I probably should have said it when I was talking about the presidential candidates. You know, the scary campaign ads you see on television is just like paid for the committee to support blah, blah, blah. Like that is not ASTA PAC. We are connected to the organization. Only ASTA members can contribute to ASTA PAC. So if you're a non-member, we use that money for different purposes. It goes to our advocacy fund, but I can't use it for political purposes. If you contribute but use your company card instead of your personal card, I cannot use that money for political purposes. There are strict laws around this industry. So because I have to report it to the FEC every month, you can go to FEC's website and just search travel advisors, and it will give you, it will automatically pull up 23 to 24. And if you click on just disbursements, that's the money we've given out. You can see all the candidates that ASTA has contributed to. You can also see all the people who have contributed to ASPEC.
Okay. All right. I think that's everything.
Sure. I'm
Debbie
going to
would
put
like you to put that website up again.
I'm going to put it in the chat so no one can forget it. And then search travel advisors. That's sometimes I have to look back to see like what month, we contributed to a candidate, something like that. So I am very familiar with how the FEC website looks. It looks like Shelton also raised a hand.
Shelton.
Yeah, sorry, I just went over to look at to pull the FEC report, and it looks like you're sitting on about $500,000 on hand. Going forward, is that obviously you're not going to say, no, we're in great financial condition, we don't need any more donations. But
right,
in a historical sense, from a dry powder perspective, what does that feel like? Do you feel comfortable with that? Is that a terrifying number? We're at the end of an election cycle. We have new Congress coming in. I mean, what is your opinion of that financial?
That is a very astute question, Shelton. Like you said, I'm never going to say, no, we're in great place. You can hold off on your contributions to 2025. I had set what I felt were ambitious but realistic goals. I love goals. I'm the weirdo who loves performance reviews. I love setting metrics and, building out plans to reach them. I had set a goal to bring in from the ASTA members $350,000 over the 2-year period. Election cycles are always 2 years, so 23 and 24. By comparison, last cycle, 21 and 22 was not quite 320,000. So it did, 10% increase to get us to 350,000. Through the middle of October, because that was the last time we had to file an FEC report, ASTA members have contributed $410,000 to the association's PAC. I am very comfortable with the $500,000 we have on hand. I actually I had hoped to spend a little bit more money. I'd actually budgeted. We put together a budget at the beginning of every Congress. I will wait until the committee assignments come out to build that budget. But I had actually budgeted to spend, I want to say about $325. We ultimately didn't because FAA wrapped up pretty quickly. And then when the end result was language that we had worked very hard to get in that bill didn't stay in the bill, I kind of took a little bit of pause and reevaluated how we spend our money. And once FAA reauthorization was over, where our priorities were going to be moving forward. So we had a little bit of pause in there just to kind of reevaluate strategy and how we spend, which is why we ultimately didn't end up spending as much money as I had originally anticipated. I will say at this point in time, only 2 of the people ASTA PAC gave to lost their reelection bids. It is probably looking like it's going to be 3 at this point in time. I don't like talking about win-loss rates because if I wanted 100% of the people I gave money to return to Congress, I could guarantee that. I could just give to people in safe seats. I want to make sure our supporters have the money that they need. Also, someone in a tight race needs that money more than someone in a safe seat. So I want to make sure that they have the funds that they need to return to Congress. It's unfortunate that 2 of our largest supporters didn't, but kind of how it goes every 2 years here, which, can be a lot sometimes. So the short answer to your very simple question that I turned into a complicated long answer was I'm really comfortable with the money we have on hand. I actually wish it was a little lower, but I do believe it allows us to start really, really strong next year and get in front of the people that we need to get in front of to build relationships.
Got it. Okay, I appreciate it. Like I said, it was more of a cash on hand. You don't
Yeah.
file a P&L, so to understand what initiatives are actually turning fruitful now that we're not going to be in a campaign position for 2 years to see where these funds get allocated.
So every member of Congress is limited to 5,000 in the primary and 5,000 in the general. That's as much as the ASTA PAC can give to any one person running for office. Now it's 5,000 per election. So if there's like in a special election or something weird, it can be more than that, but it ends up being 5,000 per election. So, you want to spend that 5,000 before the primaries, and some states will have early primaries in 2026. Some have late primaries. But, kind of the things I did at my last job that seemed to work well that I'm trying to bring to ASTA is not waiting until 2026 to spend that money, not waiting until the second year. So you can continue those relationships, right? It comes with like, oh, I recognize her face. And then it's like, oh, that's the girl from the travel advisors. And then it's like, okay, now I remember her name. And you can't do that if you just spend that money in that 1 year, right? When everybody else wants to be in front of that member. So we're in a really good position to start strong next year. And I'll probably budget to spend a little bit more than I did this cycle because of that, which is a great place to be. I'm very happy. To the best of my knowledge, this is the largest ASTA PAC has ever been. And I've been both humbled and excited by the engagement from the ASTA members about it. Again, an unnecessarily long answer.
Okay, Jessica. Kathy Sikora just wanted you to know that she feels you're fantastic and you're an excellent person for this role.
Thank you. I am happy to be here. As I said to Karen before, you guys all jumped on. I love presenting. It's one of my favorite part of my jobs. I couldn't see your faces or your reactions, which can get tough sometimes, but you guys have now stuck with me for about 57 minutes. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for all of this really valuable information, and it's really exciting to see some of the initiatives for 2025. All really great stuff. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us today.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Great presentation.